You're looking a little flush there, Johnny.
Yeah,
a little red in the cheeks there. Little kung pao for Brecky.
Yeah, a little warm. You know when you like try to rush a workout in, and then you go to work, and like I jumped in the lake. It didn't quite take, so whatever.
Johnny, from the frying pan onto the dock, relaxing after a big trip to the Worlds. Okay, guys, let's do this podcast thing. Here we go. Hello, folks, and welcome to Got Your Back, NHL edition. LeBrun, Rishaug, and MJ. Yes, Mystic Mike Johnson back from his magical adventures overseas at the World Hockey Championships. I'm sure he's got some tales for us in what was a pretty exciting event. Canada comes away with gold, but they weren't necessarily the big story, and we'll get to that with Mike Johnson. As always, Got Your Back, NHL edition, brought to you by our great friends over at Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals. They provide equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry. But what sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value their company has. Their employees all live by it. They'll bend over backwards getting their clientele what they want when they need it. Absolutely no excuses. I'd say we're similar here on Got Your Back. I think that's the way we operate, fellas. Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals. Proud to have them as our title sponsors as we check in with Pierre LeBrun at the home post. And MJ, based on your background, I'm thinking maybe cottage country?
Yeah, just a brief pit stop. I've been home for a couple days. I got to go down to, I have to. I get to go down to Vegas on Thursday for final, so I'll be on the road again. But a couple days, rest, recharge, get to the cottage, sleep in, get the fresh air, get a couple workouts in, try to eat something healthy, cottage country.
Look at Pierre. Pierre's so rattled he's not at his cottage right now.
I can't now. I mean, I the last 2 weekends I snuck some trips up to the cottage.
Okay.
With the kids, so I can't complain actually.
Can't complain too much.
Yeah.
So Johnny, you talk about working out. You told me before you went for a bike ride on the dock. I need you to clarify how you go for a bike ride on the dock. You got like a stationary or recumbent bike out there?
Yeah, exactly. I'm part of the Peloton fam. I got into it like everybody else in the pandemic. So I have a Peloton down in the boathouse, like on the water. So you can kind of like open the garage door and then you see the water right in front of you. And it's a lovely place to try to work out in the morning, watch some morning sports center and then jump in the water when you're done, which is what I did, which is why I'm still kind of wet, but it's great. It's a great way to work out. Until the people come by that are fishing, like right in front of your dock or something, then it's kind of awkward.
They're like, who's this champ? Look at this frickin' guy. Hey, driving by on their boats.
Yeah. And then the odd time, this very rarely happens, but if it's super hot, like you might take your shirt off because I'm in my house, right? Like I'm just kind of sweating and working out. And then it's really embarrassing. If someone comes by and you have your shirt off and you're like riding a bike, it's not good.
Pierre, what do you got on your dock, bud?
I have a boat attached to it and some Muskoka chairs, and I just sit there and I'll stare at my lake.
And that's awesome. So relaxing. Hey, by the way, Pierre, at long last, the Kuma gear is on its way.
I've heard this.
It is on its way, buddy. Yeah, Matt finally kicked me in the rear end, and so you got a little drinkware coming. Might even be a hoodie in there. Now, MJ. If we put your name on the title of this thing, that qualifies you for Kuma swag as well. So maybe we'll eyeball that for the future. But if your name's not on the title, you don't necessarily qualify for the swag just yet. But P, yours is coming, man.
Oh, that alone might be enticing enough. That mug that I see you drink out of every day, I get so jealous of. I got like a regular glass. It's unacceptable.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. We'll get you some Kuma
advantage
drinkware.
you.
Well, I almost don't.
Clearly.
Yeah, I almost don't have to do the sponsor read now because that was just it. But let's get to the breakdown, guys, because there's lots going on. And that, of course, is brought to you by our buddies over at Kuma Outdoor Gear. They got a wide range of gear to fit all of your outdoor needs, whether you want to go camping or do some tailgating with football season on the way. They've got a great new product in their Switchback heated chair as well. Bluetooth connected Switchback heated chair. Great drinkware. I was at their shop here in Edmonton the other day and just love the stuff, man. They've figured out a way to actually make comfortable camping chairs. I sat in 4 or 5 different ones. So check out Kuma Outdoor Gear. All right, gentlemen, no place to start other than in Toronto. Darren Dreger reporting on SportsCenter that Brad Treliving on the verge of becoming the team's new general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. MJ, is it a reasonable question to ask why or how is Brad Treliving an upgrade over Kyle Dubas? What do you think?
Of course, it's reasonable. If you replace someone, presumably you're replacing them to improve or at the very least be different. Because GMs, it's hard to say. He's better because of this. He's an upgrade because of this. Probably the better question might be is, how is he different than Kyle Dubas? What is going to be different about Brad Treliving running the Maple Leafs than Kyle Dubas running the Toronto Maple Leafs? And whether that is better or worse, some of that's not even within GM's control. But how will he be different? Now, you heard Shanny talk about wanting a guy with experience. Well, he's different than Kyle was when he started in that sense. He has experience. Someone with a little bite. I don't even know what that means. Maybe to have hard decisions. And he's also faced a Canadian market that went through a pretty tumultuous player personnel time in Calgary, right? And Toronto is a Canadian market, and it's on the verge of potentially a tumultuous player personnel time, Pierre. So, I guess I see why he is a good candidate. I don't know until he gets in there, and maybe the coaching decision has as much to do with how he might be different as anything. But I get why he's qualified. I guess we'll see how he's different.
Yeah, and he's clearly been the candidate that Brendan Shanahan has had eyes for from the get-go. And yeah, he spoke to other people. As I reported this week, he had a Zoom call with Mark Bergevin, which frankly was smart to do, if anything else, just to get Mark Bergevin's opinion probably of the Leafs, right? After being a division rival for 10 years. But Treliving just always felt like wasn't so much as Brendan Shanahan going to want to hire him, but more like, why wouldn't he? And I always had that feeling of it. They spent 2.5 days together last week, I guess it was. And, you just had a feeling that an offer was coming at some point. So we'll see how this ends up. But as Drake said, all signs point to him being hired. I think, the question you asked, Ryan, was, is it an upgrade on Kyle Dubas? I guess I would answer your question with a question. Was there an upgrade out there available?
Mm-hmm.
And so once Brendan Shanahan put parameters on his search by saying that he wanted to hire someone with GM experience, when you consider the people actually available, that wasn't a long list of people. So I think he hired someone, well, he looks like he will hire someone, if all goes well, that checked a lot of boxes, was also available, and isn't afraid to make bold moves, which is exactly what this job requires right from the get-go in terms of what lies ahead for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So not surprised if this obviously ends up being the case.
Remember, though, Johnny, it was, Brendan Shanahan that made the decision to part ways. So the question, is it an upgrade, is very relevant because, he should have been thinking about that before he makes that decision. Is there a better option out there? You don't make that decision on Dubas in a vacuum. If you're not looking out there and thinking, here would be the fallback, here would be the option. We might be in a better position if we do this. You don't make the decision to part ways with Kyle Dubas and then cross your fingers you can get somebody that's an upgrade. If you're the one that initiates it, don't you think you should?
Yes. I guess what I'm saying, Shaggy, is how do you determine what makes him an upgrade? You make a case for Treliving being better. I would make a case for Dubas being better. I can make a case for Dubas. You can it's hard to quantify that absolutely appropriate. And the proof will be in the pudding. I think this is one of those things we have to see what's different. We have to see if they are any better on the ice. We have to see if they can do anything different in the playoffs. But yes, of course you need an idea of someone. If you're going to let go of a guy who's very accomplished and very successful, you better have someone in mind who you think can do that. I just don't know. I don't even know whoever you perceive to be the best GM in the league. I don't know who it is. Whoever it is. Are they an upgrade on Kyle Dubas? I don't know how you define that other than, well, maybe the best GM team won. Does that make him the best GM? Not in my mind. So I guess it's just a hard question to answer until you see what he does. But he's qualified to get a look to try to do whatever it is they plan on doing in Toronto.
Pierre, Treliving's Flames won 2 playoff series in 9 years. Dubas's Leafs won 1 playoff series in 5 years. Which guy do you think would be viewed as having had more success with their organization? I mean, neither guy's got the results that they wanted. You can make the argument that Dubas had more to work with in his tenure in Toronto than Treliving had.
Yeah, and I think that probably harder for Brad Treliving to attract some top free agents to Calgary in some ways compared to people wanting to be in Toronto. I think you have to point that out. The other interesting thing is that if this thing gets finalized and it is Brad Treliving, that his number one priority hours into his reign as GM in Toronto would be to tackle the Auston Matthews file. And of course, it's still pretty fresh what Brad Treliving lived through in terms of losing Johnny Gaudreau to market last year. And the pressure that would be on Treliving and Brendan Shanahan, who very much is, I think, under pressure at this point in terms of himself having 2 years left on his deal. And I would think that the Leafs ownership wanting to break through here very soon. But the pressure to get Auston Matthews signed this summer is, I don't even know if you could put a label on how much pressure there is on that.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me to think about as Brad Treliving would have had these conversations with Brendan Shanahan about this for sure, about whether he's reliving some history that isn't that long ago, in terms of how things played out with Johnny Gaudreau in Calgary. So that's pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, that would be fascinating. I mean, Auston already had all the leverage. Like, if Brad Treliving gets this job or whoever gets it, their first assignment, what do we do with Matthews? What do we do with Nylander?
Yeah.
What do we do with Marner? Like those are the three big things. And there is a time sensitive element to that with the no trades kicking in on July 1st. But, the fact of the matter is Auston has all the leverage right now, doesn't he? Like he legitimately can say, I don't know. I got to see. I don't know what you're all about. I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know who the coach is going to be. And do you want me to commit 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years without me knowing that? And then once July 1st happens, then he's got you because he has the full no trade or whatever. So now you can't even deal him if it were to go sideways. So it's an interesting dynamic, which is part of the reason why if they're going to go down this road, like go to get it done already. Like I don't know what, just do it and let him get to work because there's lots of work to be done.
I wonder, too, from an agent standpoint, if you're advising Auston Matthews and you're thinking about the guy you're sitting across the table from, and are they willing to trade this player? Are they willing to trade this player truly? You're sitting across from a guy that just got big time stung by, not trading a guy that was heading into that year. And I just wonder if that changes their headspace on the guy they're dealing with across the table. Not the guy that went all in on the deals, not the guy that's been there from the start, a new guy who just got bit. Another big decision, Pierre, is Sheldon Keefe. Johnny, I'll ask you. You can answer second, but what's the likelihood of Sheldon Keefe coming back, and would you keep him, Johnny? But Pierre, what's your sense on the likelihood that he is back in a Brad Treliving era in Toronto? How would you handicap it?
Sorry, I thought we were going MJ first.
Oh, no. Sorry, I made that more confusing than I needed to. That was bad hosting.
Yeah. I honestly have no sense yet.
I was right on it, Shoggy.
Yeah. I have no sense of that because I think you have to finalize the GM hire. You have to hear from the GM. I think it'd be pure speculation at this point. So, yeah, it's easy to say you would think Treliving would want his own guy behind the bench. But I don't know, maybe Brendan Shanahan whispers in his ear that he really likes his coach and that they should give him another year. So I think I have no sense of it right now.
I would just say this. The longer, like we're seeing coaches fall off the board, day by day here, right? And the longer you wait, the fewer coaches that would be available that you might want to consider. Whether they do or not, I don't know. Obviously not Spencer Carberry, but, Laviolette goes to the Rangers and that's a guy off the board, or you've got Brunette's now gone. That's a guy off the board. Whatever it might be, the longer you wait, the tougher it is to make a change middle of summer. Not as many people available, not as many options. So, it's interesting. I do think it sort of flows though, Shoggy, from the player decision. Like if they return largely the same group, I wonder then, does Sheldon Keefe make sense? Because they've had success before in the regular season, or does he not make like I think it's kind of tied in. Like if you change the personality of the team, is it worth then changing the coach because Sheldon trying to coach a different group the same way or a different group a different way would be a tricky dynamic for a guy who's been one way his 4 or 5 years here. Not that he couldn't. Of course, he's smart enough to. It's just more, when you've been with a guy and he's been one way, and then he goes and becomes a different kind of coach, sometimes it's harder to land, not as captive an audience as maybe if they change. So I think the longer it takes, the more likely he stays, for sure.
Pierre, the meeting with Matthews chronologically would happen before the decision is made on Keefe, would it not? Would you not need to hear where Auston Matthews' head is at on this situation before you just go ahead and, you keep a guy or isn't that an important conversation? Isn't Auston Matthews' perspective on that matter?
Yeah, but I think Brendan Shanahan already knows that.
Yeah.
Remember, it's not like the lease president is the one that's been here the longest. He has a pretty good sense of what's going on down there. So I think at the end of the day, going back to Matthews, what's fascinating to me is because I think a lot of people are saying a lot of the same things right now, analyzing this from afar, which is that you can easily make the case from the player's perspective that it's $15 million a year. And you can easily make the case from the team perspective that it's $13 million a year. And then what's the wiggle room in between? What do you do if you're the Leafs and it's $15 million a year? Are you really going to try and win without Auston Matthews? Yeah. I don't even know what, So, the only leverage the team has is we really want to win a cup. Yeah, we really want to win a cup. And we think you want to win a cup here. And that extra $2 million is a big deal. Now, again, these aren't numbers that come from either side because they haven't even got into that yet. They're waiting for the GM. But I'm just saying it's pretty obvious to me that that's where all this is headed in terms of you can see the parameters. And that $2 million matters. So that's what's fascinating to me is what do you say if you're the Leafs at that point?
Please be nice to us. Please don't set the bar that high. That's all. You're just throwing yourself at the mercy of Auston Matthews' generosity. Yeah. Do you really need 120? Can't you deal with 104? Won't that be enough? That's basically what they're going to be saying to him. And because Nathan MacKinnon didn't take $2 million more than Connor McDavid, so why don't you just bump up a little bit on MacKinnon and just kind of creep forward as opposed to leaps and bounds? It's an interesting dynamic that they find themselves in. A good problem to have, I guess. But the reality remains, are they really going to trade Auston? Are they really going to trade Auston Matthews?
Can't trade him.
It's such a tough decision. But I also would caution this, Ryan. And you're right. Shanny would know how Auston feels about the system and the city and the coach and everything. I would be so leery, even Auston Matthews, as great as he is, as important as he is, of putting too much stock into anything a player says about a coach, about player decisions, about I just don't know if players know enough. They have their own feelings and they're worth whatever they feel, but they just don't know enough or think about it enough to put too much stock in, I'd like to have whoever, Lindy Ruff as a coach, so go get him. I just don't know if they know enough.
Mm-hmm. I guess you just as an organization need to know if there's a problem. And to your point, Pierre, I think they would probably know that by this point in time.
Yeah, okay, they've had their exit interviews and so on and so on.
Yeah.
Although I guess it was Kyle Dubas who did the exit interview.
So there you go. You assume they would have debriefed on it. I would assume.
The bottom line is you can't trade Auston Matthews if you are intent on still being a contender. Bottom line. But you also can't let him walk into free agency in 13 months.
Well, okay, never mind 13 months, because he can walk himself into free agency in a month and a half.
Well, you have to make sure he's signed by July 1st.
You can't do two different things. Okay, so Pierre,
let's sign him by July 1st.
You don't have him.
Yeah.
So you don't sign him by July 1st. He's not signed. What are you going to do? You're going to trade him on June 30th? I'm putting it to you. You're the GM. Pierre LeBrun's running the GM. You're negotiating. Hasn't worked. What are you going to do? It's June 30th. He doesn't care. He's got all the marbles. He's got everything. He's got everything in his pocket. What are you going to do? What can they do?
It's an awful position to be in. I don't like either scenario, but at the end of the day, and now I'm being really blunt, Brendan Shanahan has 2 years left on his deal. But probably next season will feel like the true, for him, from his perspective, the show me year. from ownership's perspective. If you have one more year, at least of Auston Matthews, you have one more year of Auston Matthews.
Yeah. I like
Sorry,
Blunt
I'm just
Pierre.
going to be blunt about it.
No, I like Blunt Pierre, buddy. I like that. That's good. That's good stuff. Okay, let's shift over to Kyle Dubas then. So we hear about meetings happening in Pittsburgh. Looks like it's heading in that direction. I mean, is there any doubt, Pierre, after he meets, you meet with Sidney Crosby? Do you turn the job down after you meet with Sidney Crosby, or is this hurtling in that direction?
Hard to say. I will tell you that, throughout this process, I've reached out to Kyle Dubas a bunch of times, and finally, late last week, he very politely asked me to stop asking.
You got the old "Hey Pierre, pound sand."
No, I mean, it was very polite, but I think clearly he's said the same to other media members, because there's nothing getting out that this was a very personal thing for him about what he was going to do, and that he didn't want to comment on it on or off the record. And so we're just waiting to see on the other side of this what his decision is. Is it yes or no? It's fascinating. And, I said this last week, and I don't think Penguins fans are too pleased with me, but I'll say it again. I don't think this is a good job. But
there's that.
But I've also been, because I think this team in 2 years is in big trouble, but they could also, have some success between now and 2 years. But I think this roster is headed for trouble. And I don't care how good you are as a GM. But I've also been around a long time, and I know that no matter how good a GM may be, they are paranoid people, and they always feel like if I sit out too long, am I in trouble of not getting a job again, which seems ridiculous in Kyle Dubas' case. But a job is a job, so we'll see ultimately what he decides.
I think he feels, that he is good enough and accomplished enough that he can be particular about where he goes. Obviously, like if he was desperate just to get back in, he'd take it. He would figure out a way to go to Pittsburgh. But the fact that he's, working through it tells you just how confident he is in his own abilities, that if he doesn't like this job, he'll get offered another one. So it's interesting, though. Like, there's only 32 GM jobs. If you want one, do you take one in a bad situation? Because you want the job. I think we can all look around the league and say that guy took a job because it's his first job and it's not a great situation, or it's bad ownership, or they're playing in a college rink, or whatever it might be. But you got to take it. But Kyle might be at the level where he's not in that spot. Pittsburgh's tricky because they probably have another year where they could be decent, but then they're going to be in a tough situation, and they have new ownership. Like, what's that Fenway group think about a GM coming saying, like, I don't think we're going to be good for a few years. You just spent $800 million on the franchise. You don't want to start rebuilding right away. That's another dynamic of the Pittsburgh job. There'll be a challenge for whoever takes it, Kyle or otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I spoke to a candidate who interviewed for the Pittsburgh GM job, who said he gave them a pretty raw assertion of where their roster was and where it's headed.
I believe that candidate is no longer a candidate.
No longer a candidate. But the thing is, a lot of these people that go in for these jobs, if they believe in themselves, feel they have to be that way in those interviews.
For sure.
Otherwise, you're getting the job under a false pretense. So, listen, any team with Sidney Crosby on it, I would never bet against. But boy, is there a lack of depth on this roster, and a lot of picks traded away. Aging core, it's I don't know. I mean, listen, Fenway may have thrown enough money at Kyle Dubas that he can't say no, but easy for me to say. But I would, if I were Kyle Dubas, I would wait out this cycle and see what happens next year.
It's going to be interesting to see as the musical chairs in the GM world continue in the National Hockey League. All right, Quizmaster, once again, big, long, detailed notes, and we have completely gone over time, and all of his hard work is going to go to waste if we don't move on. So let's get to the Stanley Cup Final here. Pierre, you once again did your annual polling of executives and people around the league and such in handicapping the Stanley Cup Final. Give us the results. What did you find in your article? Where does the advantage lie according to the big brains?
Yeah, so I reached out to 13 front office people across the league and 8 head coaches. So 21 people in total. Uh, 13 voted for Vegas winning the Cup. 7 voted for Florida, and 1 gave me a pick 'em. So 13, 7, and 1, which I
You got to
think
strike
is
that guy off your list. He doesn't get to do any more of the
yeah.
polls.
Holy
but he
fence
gave a good quote within the fence sitting. So
Come on, who is that? You got to out that guy.
No.
Come on, who is it?
I'm not outing that head coach because
it's a
was a
coach.
thoughtful
Okay,
answer.
coach.
Yeah.
We'll narrow it down.
So so I think 13, 7, and 1 is representative of probably where the book is on it, right? I mean, Vegas is favored. And yet Florida's arguably beaten 3 teams that had better odds. Well, not arguably. They've beaten 3 teams on the way here that had better odds to win the Cup than Vegas before the playoffs started, right? In Boston, Toronto, and Carolina, unless I have that wrong, because Vegas were Pacific Division champions. But I don't know, Vegas I think had this exact same amount of points in the standings as the Leafs, and then Boston, Carolina were ahead of those 2 teams, and Florida just keeps plowing through. So, at the end of the day, I have such a hard time. Like, a lot of the people picking Vegas said to me in their comments that they felt the Vegas blue line is so big and physical and deep that they would neutralize that Florida forecheck, that they wouldn't get to the net enough. And I understand that line of thinking, and it may play out given what we saw from the Vegas blue line and the Oilers. But I will tell you that Florida got through a very deep Boston Bruins blue line, and they also got through, no disrespect to the Leafs, a very deep Carolina Hurricanes blue line, and it didn't seem to pose much of a problem for the Panthers. So I don't know. I think you can talk yourself into any explanation of why you're picking X team. Personally, I'm taking Florida in 6. They give me vibes of the 2012 LA Kings, who were 8 seeds and just got on a train and never got off.
Mystic, who you got?
I got Vegas. It's very. I hate to say it, but it's very close series. Like, this is not one that I say I got Vegas and I am fully confident that it's going to go this way. Like, it's a very close series. But for many of the same reasons, as long as Adin Hill stays playing really well, that's a bit of a question mark. You're on your 3rd or 4th string goaltender. But I do think you start looking through the league and every time teams go to the final, right? Like, everyone's like, well, what can you learn? What is it about these teams that other teams might want to replicate? And it's a dangerous game to play because the margins are so tight, and we know this. But the one thing I kind of take from both teams is that at its core in the playoffs, it's often a very physical game around the net, right? Like, and your kind of ability to get there and be there and win there, it goes a long way in winning in the playoffs. And I think Vegas's defense makes that difficult. They're big people. They're rangy and they're heavy and they're strong and they do a good job, and they have 4 good defensive centermen. Like, they're a good defensive team and an excellent coach. So I think Vegas will be a long series, a tight series. And Pierre, while you say they blew through Carolina, like they did. Carolina probably should have won 3 of the 4 games they played against them, right? So, like, it's not like they manhandled Carolina. Like, their goalie won them some games, and they had the big moments where they won in overtime, and they deserve all the credit in the world. But it's not like it was like, oh, they had no trouble with that. I mean, they had a lot of trouble with that.
It was probably the closest sweep ever. Yeah, it was probably the closest sweep ever. I just mean that you can make the arguments that the best 2 blue line cores in the league belonged in Carolina and Boston before the playoffs started, and Florida beat them.
The Panthers rolled through them. Yeah, no, that's a fair point.
I mean,
okay, I'm looking at the clock here, fellas. I'm going Florida. No, I'm going Florida. They've got. I agree with Pierre, and I covered that Cup run in 12 with LA, where there was just something about that team. There was just something about how committed each guy was to the role, and they had these. Like, Florida just has these guys they're just so committed to doing it the right way. You got Matthew Tkachuk, who's just. I mean, he's as much a gamer right now as there is in the game.
Are you suggesting that the teams they're beating are not committed to the roles?
No, but when a team has something going...
Well, I'm just saying, when you say commitment, I'm pretty sure the team they're playing is committed too. Like I'm pretty sure Toronto's committed and Carolina's committed and Boston's committed. I just don't know. Like when people say they want it more or they're committed, I'm like, that's full of sugar. Like, that is not true. Everyone is committed. It's the playoffs. Anyways, but I digress.
Well, yeah, no, that's fine. And so replace the word commitment. Basically what I'm saying to you, Johnny, is Florida feels like they've got something special going right now. They seem to have bottled it, and they seem to have access to it when they need it. And I think that matters. They're in control of their high-end game. They can throw it out there when they need to. I like the goaltending, and I think Matthew Tkachuk is a great story. So I think it's going to be a great series. I've got the Florida
Panthers.
That's
a way better answer. Just for your
one true concern that I have for the Panthers is that 9 days between games played.
2 weeks off. Yeah,
it's that's hard, man.
Yeah,
and I've seen, I forget the year, but I've seen teams show up to the Cup final with that much rust, and so let's see how they get back on.
Okay, we now have
game one looms large.
We got to switch over into rapid fire mode now because you guys have both been extremely long-winded today. And so the Quizmaster is panicking behind the scenes. So we're going to go rapid fire on these last elements that we have here. So I don't know, keep your answers 15, 20 seconds, something like that. Chris, you can add some exciting music in post-production if you want, but it's not required. The guys will be exciting enough. Conn Smythe leaders heading into the Stanley Cup Final. I'll chuck a couple possibilities out there. Bobrovsky, Matthew Tkachuk, Aiden Hill, Marchessault. You guys can add another one in there if you want. Johnny, we'll start with you. Who's the leader heading in, and who do you think wins it?
It's Bob, and it's not even really close. Like, you know what? As great as Matthew Tkachuk has been, and that's saying something, it's Bob. I mean, you look at his impact on the series, on each game, his game score, his goal saved above average, whatever you want to do, it's Bob. And I think he's one of those rare situations. If he plays decent and they lose, he probably wins it anyways. Pierre?
P?
Yeah, it's Bobrovsky for me. I mean, I know that I've actually been, I vote on the Conn Smythe every year, and I try to say, let's not always give it to the goalie because you can't win a cup without a goalie playing great. So it has to be a really special year for me for a goalie to win the Conn Smythe. But I think he's in that category. I mean, I think what he's done is a level above even what we see normally from a goalie that has a chance to win the cup.
I got Tkachuk because I think what he's done already, I'm all about timing, and man, this guy's timing for big moments has been unbelievable, and he's going to have lots of opportunity for more, and I think he's going to seize those opportunities. That goes into my next question. Who are we going to be talking about more in the Stanley Cup Final? Jack Eichel or Matthew Tkachuk? Johnny?
I think Matthew Tkachuk, because he just dominates the storylines, and his personality is such that he is embracing being the lead figure in the NHL right now. So we'll talk about him a lot. But make no mistake, Jack Eichel, he's going the Ron Hainsey route. Don't make it forever. I make it one time. I'm going to go all the way to the final and maybe win. And Jack Eichel, when he's good, and he was good against Dallas, Pierre, he's about as talented as anybody in the league, not named McDavid. Like, he's incredibly talented guy. So with that ego he has, that confidence, he's going to want to rise to the occasion. So I don't want to sleep on Eichel, but it's going to be Matt.
Yeah, it's going to be Tkachuk, but I got to say Eichel's story is unbelievable when you consider the neck injury and him fighting for his medical vision that he had for himself, the kind of surgery that he thought he wanted after talking to doctors, and a lot of people not believing in that. Like, I think that's undersold as a story what Jack Eichel went through. You got to be happy for the guy.
So people may not recall, but Bill Foley stated an expectation on the Golden Knights when they took over and when they were launching. Win a Stanley Cup within 6 years of their franchise birth. Might well happen. Fantastic planning, Johnny, or just got lucky throwing that number out?
Well, he made it the first year. If it was such great planning, you should have said, I want to win it in year one. So it's not like they took the path to a 6-year climb. This is straight luck and really good management out of the gate and really good management since then. But let's not make this part of a grand plan coming together. It's not the A-team. Yeah. You love it when a plan comes together. Not at all. This is just, he's hitting it. But what's amazing, right? 2 conference finals in 6 years. And crazy. I'm thinking, Toronto hasn't made a final since 1967. Like, it's insane the success they've had. And here they are in their 6th year, maybe making them look like a prophet. He'll be mystic, Bill.
Yeah, and I think I could be wrong, but I think only Tampa has won more playoff rounds since Vegas came into the league as Vegas.
Wow.
Like, it is absolutely crazy. And it's a team that has chased it from day one because of their early success, and for the most part have been on the right side of a lot of aggressive moves. Not all. I mean, I think, the way Marc-Andre Fleury exited, and I also say, looking back, Pacioretty for a package that includes Nick Suzuki go to Montreal. But overall, just the gamble on Jack Eichel, beating out everyone for Alex Pietrangelo in free agency, those are moves that's why they're back in the Cup final.
Touching the trophy. We talk about this all the time. We pay attention to it. People roll their eyes. I will note that Alex Pietrangelo made the decision not to touch it when he was with the St. Louis Blues. They went on to win. They made the decision not to touch it. He was part of the leadership group making that call this year. Of course, the other guys basically did everything but take a lap with it. MJ, what would you do in that situation? Does any of that crap even matter?
No, it matters not. I mean, I know people track this, and the people who touch it have this winning percentage, and the people who don't touch it, whatever. But like, I think it's so hard to get to where they are now to take 20 minutes and enjoy it, like Florida did. Like, pick the thing up and we accomplished something. Yeah. Not what we want to accomplish, but we're on our way. Like, I would touch it comfortably, and if the team said don't do it, I'm like, okay, I don't care. It's fine with me. It means I'm not a particularly superstitious person, P. So I would probably touch it if it didn't matter. If the team said don't, then I wouldn't.
If I could care less about a single thing in hockey, I don't know what it would be. Maybe the All-Star game. Who cares if they? I never even look for it. I make a point of leaving the press box if I'm covering the end of a conference final before I even see if they touch it or not. Who cares? Ridiculous. Next.
Well, the players care because it's clearly something they put some thought into. But I like it. Like firing up Pierre. We got one more here before red card. No, let's just do red card, yellow card.
Let's talk about GM award voting and when they vote on it. Let's do that again.
Yeah, we really want to rile up Pierre and get him feeling passionate. Red card, yellow card, no card.
Where would Bill Zito hang on, Shoggy. Where would Bill Zito have finished on, with 10 days left in the season, where would Bill Zito have finished in GM of the Year voting? Just saying.
Well,
it's
so that's what I mean. And by the way, I whether the Panthers made the playoffs or not, I said this at the time. It was a bold move that would eventually pay off for him for Matthew Tkachuk. I didn't realize it would pay off right away. But you're right.
I mean, if he was good enough to be there a month later, then he was good enough to be that guy before the playoffs started, and he wouldn't have been. Shows the flaws in the voting.
They should vote at the end of the regular season
by whoever votes these things. Yeah.
All right. Red card, yellow card, no card, gentlemen. And we're going to go to Bruce Cassidy on this one. Quote from Bruce Cassidy: "To me, the biggest indicator of our lack of desperation was we had 24 giveaways tonight. I'm not sure you're beating the Arizona Coyotes in January with 24 giveaways. No disrespect to Arizona, but it's not the right way to play. We're trying to go to the Stanley Cup Final against a desperate team. So to me, that's the whole game right there. First and foremost, love it. And as media guys, we hate criticizing people when they actually say something, but we had to use this as a red card, yellow card, no card. MJ called out the old Arizona Coyotes, your alma mater. Are you livid as a former member? What do you think? What color card?
That's a red card. My Coyotes are howling in their college rink. Come on now. What's the GIF or the GIF when it's like, stop it, he's dead already. Like, that's what it feels like. We get it. Yes. The Coyotes are in a tough spot. Stop beating down on them. And to be fair, they're not the worst team in the league. Why don't you say Anaheim? Yeah. Why don't you say Chicago? They were way worse than Arizona. Come on now. Bruce, that is unfair. Kicking them while they're down. On the flip side, this is pro sports. You don't want people to give it to you? Be better. Play in a real rink. Get more fans. Win a playoff round. Whatever it might be. Don't be in bankruptcy all the time. Then no one says it. But I don't know. As a former Yote, that's a red card. Come out to the desert and we'll put you in the middle of... Yeah, that's no good. No good at all.
P?
I'm going to go no card because I'm begging hockey people to be more interesting and more colorful. Every time a coach or a player says something controversial, we're reminded why they don't want to do that because we get all over them. I'm reminded watching the NBA playoff coverage and how amazing some of the series have been in the NBA, how there are crazier things said by everyone involved and no one bats an eye. And when we get into hockey, it's like, ooh, be careful. Bulletin board material. Listen, this wasn't Wayne Gretzky calling the New Jersey Devils a Mickey Mouse franchise in 1982, okay?
I'll tell you what, Johnny, I don't know if they actually have room for bulletin boards on the dressing room at that college rink or not, but if they have room for bulletin boards, that'll be up there when they play next year. I'm going yellow card on this. It's a hard shot, and I'm sure, I mean, everybody would use Arizona as an example behind the scenes. They've been a punchline here for a little bit, fair or not fair, but he let that slip publicly. So to me, that's a yellow card. P, was Cassidy the one that wouldn't commit to which team would win the Cup final? Is he on your little secret list there? Was that him?
No, I don't think I'm asking the head coach of one of the two teams in the Cup final who he's picking for the Cup final. Strangely enough, I stayed away from anyone in the Final Four. Come on.
Great stuff, guys. That was awesome.
Hang on.
Go, Johnny.
Shuggy, as a point of reference, if you ever preface something with all due respect or no disrespect intended, be ready to hear something disrespectful because you can see you know what's coming.
1,000%. Johnny, before we let you go here, Pierre and I got JP Barry coming up, but before we let you go, I have to ask you, man, what you saw at the World Championships. Of course, Canada winning is awesome and everything, but oh boy, what was that spectacle like for the bronze medal winners?
So this World Championship will entirely be the Latvian experience. You know, I was fortunate enough to be in Riga, and the fans and the building and the city and the team and their kind of interaction and how it grew and grew and grew. And when you thought it couldn't get any more intense, more real, it did. And so I'm sitting there, Shaggy, you know what it's like in the World Championships. We're not in a press box. We're like in the stands. And so we have fans on the side of us. And when they won the bronze medal, I look over and the fans were simultaneously chugging a beer, singing a Latvian chant song, hugging their neighbor, and crying all at the same time. Like it was just, and the players on the ice were crying. I was broadcasting the game. It was hard not to be emotional while watching these athletes celebrate with their people. Amazing. And then you see the scenes in Riga from their return home on Monday. It was I feel fortunate for having experienced maybe the coolest, most intense fan-player interaction I've ever witnessed live. It was really, really special.
That was awesome to see from afar, MJ. And, you know, it gets me to an age-old debate, but it was great that in winning the bronze, they won their last game of the tournament and it fed into the celebration. And I wonder, even though the silver medal is a better medal, the fact that they won their last game, how that fed into it in terms of how festive that is, I don't know. I mean, I guess.
Imagine if they'd have been in the gold medal final. I think for the first time ever, we would have seen a team go pouring off the bench to celebrate a loss in the gold medal game.
Well, that's what I
going
wondered.
Absolutely nuts, right? Like they are special. The way they celebrate, it's amazing. I've had the privilege of covering some of their games as well. Johnny, you guys did an amazing job as always on the tournament, by the way.
And hats off to Team Canada. Like, let's be completely honest.
Yeah. When
I saw the roster early on, I was like, I wonder if they'll make the quarterfinals. And again, it just shows you that this tournament is so hard to predict every year because they came together as a team, right, MJ? Like, honestly, guys accepting roles and playing for each other. Mm-hmm. You often get way better rosters. I covered 6 of these men's worlds over the years. You get a star-studded roster, but they don't come together because everyone's like, why? How come I'm not in the first line on the first power play or playing these minutes? You could tell no one had an ego on this team. I mean, they came together, and it was amazing to see.
Yeah, good stuff. Great job today, guys. Much appreciated. Johnny, go hit the bike out on the dock. Pierre, I don't know. Let's go do some sit-ups on our front step. It's about the same thing, Johnny. If someone were to drive by our house and see me doing sit-ups or push-ups on my front step, it's the same as you riding a stationary bike on your dock.
Except nobody can drive by my house because I'm on an island and no one goes in front of me. You can't get to me. That's the whole point.
The boaters, same thing. Well, the fishermen.
It's midweek, school's in. There's no boaters up here right now, Pierre. Lake is like glass, 28 degrees. It is a beautiful
more month
in the lake.
One more month.
We'll check in with both.
I'll see you in Vegas.
Yeah, we'll check in with both you guys at the Stanley Cup Final. Yeah, more to come here on the podcast, folks. Super Agent JP Barry joining Pierre and I. Johnny, great job. Stick around. Lots to come. We want to tell you about a truly Canadian company. Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals provides equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry. But what sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value of their company. I've been to the offices. I've seen how they proudly display that on the wall at each branch. Every one of the staff members lives by the get-her-done formula to ensure they'll never let their customers down. They'll bend over backwards to get their clientele what they need when they need it. They don't make excuses. Cross Country Canada takes great pride in this attitude, and they truly believe that the success of their customer is their success. You can't get much more Canadian than that. All right, time now for Who's Got Your Back, brought to you by Liberty Smart Security, a company that, of course, specializes in having your back, your family's back. High-quality advanced smart security systems for your home or your business. They use leading-edge technology to protect the things that you value most in life. Your home is your castle, so why not protect it with Liberty Smart Security? Visit our partners, libertysecurity.ca. Okay, the agent business fascinates the heck out of me, Pierre. I'm fascinated by it, the inner workings of their job, all the things they have to do that we never hear about, what it's like, the pressure, the negotiating. And JP Barry is about as experienced as it gets from CAA. He and Pat Brisson, a couple of super agents in the league, had a great conversation with him today and some fascinating stuff about the old days, the way it used to work, the grind that it used to be, and what it's like in his shoes.
Yeah, going back to the fax machines and faxing contracts.
Stressing out over a fax machine, right?
I mean, that doesn't feel like that long ago to me. And and JP Barry's always been a really fair guy to cover. I've had to, same with you, but talk about a lot of stories that he was involved with because of all of his high profile clients. And there's been a lot over the years, including, like we talked about a year ago, the Evgeny Malkin negotiation was wild with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I know that was a pretty emotional time for Malkin, but JP Barry obviously getting him his contract in the end.
Yeah, and listen up, Calgary Flames fans, because we did dive into Backlund, and also for the Vancouver Canucks, Elias Pettersson. And that upcoming negotiation. Bit of news from JP Barry on that front as well. So presented by Liberty Smart Security. Who's got your back? Here's JP Barry. And joining us from CAA's offices in Toronto, JP Barry. So Mike Johnson was just on, and he was out at the cottage. I know Pierre spent some time out there too. JP, I don't know if there's such a thing as downtime for an agent in the summer. What does downtime look like for an agent this time of year?
Unfortunately for us, it comes a little later. I think, there's some hope that we can have a summer in later July and August, and we all push for that. I know Pierre checks out the July at 5 p.m., and we can't do that because our job's not done. But, if we don't get some of the major deals done by that first week, then things can drag, and you might as well just go and wait for the phone to come,
So we've all seen Jerry Maguire. Lots of people have watched Entourage. These are shows that have agents prominently featured in them, and they are displayed as guys that have like multiple phones, working while they're supposed to be relaxing, constantly with stuff on the go. Would you say that those are accurate representations of what it's actually like in the working world as a super agent?
No, not really. No, I mean we operate. When you watch that show, it's funny. You got one guy trying to do everything, and that's impossible. Yeah. So that might have been an image of an agent in the 1980s or 90s. As things have changed a lot. Like we work as a group. I mean, we're in hockey. We're in 6-7 countries. So our group is operating in 6 or 7 countries. So I have co-agents working with me in Stockholm and Moscow and Prague. Like you cannot be in all these places. So we have to cooperate and collaborate. And I think that's the way we've set up our group, is to be a big team, really.
JP, you got a lot of high-profile clients. One of them that you've had for a long time is Evgeny Malkin. And a year ago, heading into this offseason, that was one of the more dramatic negotiations kind of playing out front and center. As you got that deal done, finally, he briefly went to market. Bring us back to what that was like in terms of the emotion And obviously your job as an agent to stay level headed through all that, but getting that deal done at the end of the day with Pittsburgh.
It's getting, it's because of the cap, it's getting more difficult. I've noticed that a lot of our negotiations have gone down to the wire lately. I mean, or taken several months or taken a lot longer than they normally have. And I understand, because the teams need to know exactly to the dollar sometimes what they can do. And on that one, I mean, I think I had you have a client who's done what he's done his whole career, and he's very proud of it. And, he knew what he wanted, and they had to either move on the dollar or the term in that last 48 hours. And it really didn't happen until after the bell went off. So once they did show an inclination to move, we decided to try and spend 3 hours with them only. Not, we knew there were other teams waiting, but let's try one more time to see if we can close that gap. And I think both sides moved a little and we got it done, but it was, he didn't really, I think at the end of the day, it showed he wanted to stay. And I think Sidney Crosby had spoken to him several times also, and they're close that way about, their career together and playing together. So that had an impact also.
Another big one you got done during the season was David Pastrnak, and there was a lot of coverage of that throughout the year because of how important he is to the Boston Bruins. But also, I'm interested in your vantage point on this, because we know the Boston Bruins have established a very tight salary cap culture within that paradigm. And I wonder, what was that like for you to negotiate through that to get David Pastrnak his big contract?
I knew it was going to be difficult from day one, because we had a pretty large gap about where we saw the comparables and the players that you would put on the group. And, if there was 6 players, they were starting at the bottom and I was starting somewhere near the top. So I knew there was going to be, a lot of work, and it turns out it went pretty far. I think David helped me a lot in that negotiation. When you have a client who's going into his year like that and he's just scoring and scoring and scoring, it puts Boston's back against the wall. And I think, at the end of the day, I know the owner was also involved, and I did fly down to Boston and spend some time with the ownership group and Don, and, it was a very difficult negotiation, but I think we also avoided taking it right to the wire. We got it done a little bit before we had to, and sort of around the trade deadline was the time that was important for them. But I don't believe anything would ever have happened. I think they would have played with David no matter what. But that wasn't something that was working in their favor. But they're getting more difficult, and if the cap is only going to go up $1 million this year, then there's going to be some really difficult negotiations this summer.
Yeah, no kidding. I wonder how much. I mean, you have to adjust expectations, or is your client's value your client's value, and does the whole system reset in a way moving forward when it goes up a little bit more? How much does that cap affect the dollar figure that you're able to go out there and grab for your clients? And I know that there's going to be teams with space, but it's not necessarily the best situation, and you're looking to put your guys into the right situations as well. The measure of success isn't always just the maximum dollar figure; it's good situations. So how tricky does it get?
Getting very tricky, because I think the teams now too, if they want to improve their club, they've got to make some trades also. They can't just step up and say, I want X, Y, Z in free agency. They may have to juggle, and they may have to, move a player. And we're seeing that where players are ending up on teams near the basement. And, we can all talk about the theory of that, but it's not good right now. And I think a lot of teams did not plan for the cap to be this tight for 3 or 4 years. I mean, we all know it. That's the situation we're in. But many clubs had made plans 5-6 years ago, out 6 years, thinking that cap increases would be, at least modest. And we've dealt with a flat cap. And I think this summer, last summer and this summer are going to be the 2 toughest ones. And we'll see how many trades happen in the next 4 or 5 weeks just to make cap room for certain other clubs.
Well, let's touch on a couple of files that are upcoming now, and I know there's only so much you can say, JP, but one of them is Elias Pettersson, who has a year left on his deal, coming off a fantastic season for the Vancouver Canucks. Obviously, it would surprise me if the Vancouver Canucks didn't want to come to you this summer and see what they could do a year ahead of time, which is usually what happens with high-profile guys like that. What's your sense of how that might play out?
I think we're going to watch that market for players that are already out there a little bit this summer. But I think, in the talks that we've had, they do want to get together sometime this summer or early fall, at least, like in the next few months, to try and talk about the future. So I think, we've stayed in contact. Elias is he's thinking about it, and I think it's going to happen. I think we're going to sit down this summer and we're going to talk about staying there long term. So that is the plan right now.
The other one is Michael Backlund, also one of your clients. And that one might have a little more urgency to it, at least I think. You can correct me, but just given some of Craig Conroy's comments about all of his players who have a year left, and we had Craig on our podcast last week, it's pretty clear that I think he wants to get some answers from all those players about whether they want to stay and extend or not. What's your sense? I mean, have you heard from Craig Conroy, and what's your sense of how that might play out with Michael Backlund?
I have heard from him, and Michael's still working out in Calgary, so I know he does plan to talk to Craig again this week before he leaves. I think he heads back to Sweden early next week for a while, and they're going to sit down and talk. It was not dissimilar to last year, I think, with changes. I know he sat down with Brad Treliving at that time about the future, and when you've been with the organization as long as Michael has, he's been there since the very beginning, and he played with Craig also, and he's been there that long, I believe. Yeah, early on. I have to look at the crossover, but I believe they did play together. So I think they'll sit down with him, and he's got 1 year left, so he's got some decisions. I mean, he's been a Calgary Flame his whole life, but he needs to hear from the GM about what the future is, and there's a shorter window now for him. Like any player, he wants to win, and he has not gone really deep in the playoffs or challenged for a Stanley Cup, and it really is something that he wants to try and do. So they're going to have a good talk.
JP, I wonder about the conversations. I'm fascinated by the role of the agent in these situations. You talk about Craig talking with Michael. Is it different for every player in terms of, some players will be comfortable sitting down with the GM and having that chat? Are you always present? Is it different with different guys? And I imagine there's lots of stuff that goes on behind the scenes people would never know about conversations you have. What's next? The coaching situation, all of that. It's kind of your job to suss these situations out for your clients too, isn't it?
It is. I mean, yes, and with a veteran player, obviously, when you have a veteran player with a long relationship with the GM, there's three of you. The player is going to step up and be an advocate and have some face-to-face meetings. And usually I'm on the phone with the GM before that and after that, and with the player both before and after. But you want to involve them. If they have that relationship, then it should help things. Other situations, you have a young player who really you're putting them in a bad situation if you're putting them in behind a locked door with the GM and he's trying to if there's pressure. But so you have to prepare your player for certain GMs might want to put pressure on them before they go home or at the end. So every situation is completely different on how it's managed with the player involvement and helping you in the negotiations. I mean, Pasternak was a great example. I mean, he was happy to meet them too. He's been there. He it wasn't just me calling them. He went in and he met a few times, and I think it depends. But someone like Michael Backlund, a veteran like that, they're always going to have that ability. He's a leader on that team. He can walk in and have a discussion. So
I want to go back for a second, just for people listening and watching us, to get a bit of a background on you, JP. They've seen your name in the headlines for a long time because of all the clients that you have. But I wonder how many people realize that, first of all, you started in hockey at the NHLPA, right? You worked in the NHLPA offices after working at a Toronto law firm. You started at the PA before you branched out and became an agent. Maybe you can talk about your start that way.
Yeah, the PA was very different then. It was very small. I was one of the first few lawyers that came in to work with Bob Goodnow at the time. And I I was a labor and employment lawyer in Toronto. I had played good hockey background, but I had both those labor and employment things that they wanted people to be involved with. And, really my job in the early going, I was involved sort of overseeing the agents. So I got to learn a lot about what the agents were like in our business. I had to, it was a bit different agent group back then. I mean, we're talking about a time in the early 90s when many of them did not have a laptop, did not have a computer.
A guide and record book, and that was it, eh?
That's what they had. It was difficult. And some of them we had to drag into the age of internet. And we forced, I remember one of our first requirements was to explain to them that there's this thing called a laptop computer now that you can buy, because they there was computers, but none of them, they're on the go, they're traveling. So we required them all to learn how to plug in and check in with us. And
my goodness.
And that was, we set up, that was the first time when we set up all the back database to make comparisons of players. And, we could talk to the agents about what their comps were. And so we were very involved at that stage in trying to take the business to the next level. And, and the clubs did the same. I mean, they had access to statistics that we didn't have. Like some of our early fights were literally going in front of an arbitrator saying they have all these stats and they refused to give them to us. And we actually had to argue that we were entitled to the stats. And of course we won. But that sometimes took a year to get, and then the stats arrived, just so you know, they arrived in boxes. We all know
they didn't do that to you.
Yes,
they sent you boxes of stats to bury you in numbers, so you didn't know where to find what you needed.
Wow.
So we would have to input them into our system versus just plugging in. Now that's all, as we know, it's all plugged in back and forth. But
that's dirty pool.
We had to fight hard to build our comps. So I was doing that for 2 or 3 years. Obviously we had the difficult lockout in '95, the new CBA. We were involved in drafting the CBA. It took a few years, the group did. And I moved on. But in 1998, I decided to move on. And I was lucky, I had worked closely with Mike Barnett at IMG. And when I gave my resignation, he was the first one to give me a call to join them. So that was my break in moving. I was going to go back to law and ended up, going into agency.
Right. And by the way, going back to how the things were in the old days, when I started this job, and Ryan, you would remember this, but I remember I'd be talking to an agent or a GM in my early days, and I was like, well, is the player signed? And then either the agent or the GM said, well, the contract's just been faxed over. He still has to. It was all about the fax machine. And you have to wait for the contract to be. And there were fax issues. Yeah.
That was a nightmare because we were taking these negotiations right to the buzzer. And I can remember sitting in the fax machine area that we had set up in the Toronto IMG office.
Just sweating.
And a couple of deals were not quite done. So I'm not going to say whose deal it was. So we were still trying to figure out like some bonus clauses and on the phone, and Mike was on the phone and I was on the phone. And so I started shoving fax pages into the machine and sent the number. And I kept sending the first page over and over and over again of the SPC. And we were trying to get the other pages going. So I would just, so I sent like 30 times the first page to buy like an extra 15 minutes. So as long as the fax had commenced,
under the wire.
Under the wire. So
then you were
I bought an extra half hour one time.
Hey, the JP Barry Pierre, that walked into his first negotiation, where it was your job in that meeting to figure out how much money someone else gets to make. The very first time you did it, do you recall that? And how different is the JP Barry that walks into the room today?
Pretty different. I think in the early going, especially since I had worked at the PA and we were talking about leverage points and pushing, you could be a little more aggressive. You were trying to be a little more aggressive, and every once in a while you start to learn that you can get burned by just assuming that you're going to get your way or you're going to use the leverage a certain way. I think when you've been doing it now, like it's been 25 years for Pat and I doing negotiations for players, and it's now we kind of know where we are. Like, I think we have enough dialogue before we get into negotiation. We talk to teams, we get a good idea of where they want to go. So I think there's a lot more prep work than just stepping into a negotiation. It's like both sides figuring things out so that when you actually get there, you're really talking about a tighter range and you've already discussed things. So I would have to say experience does help a lot, especially in difficult negotiations, about the tone to take and the tone not to take in certain times.
Well, I want to go back just quickly, one last trip down memory lane, because I remember writing an article for the Canadian Press about you. You were a young agent at the time. Mike Barnett, who you were working with at IMG, of course, Mike Barnett famously was Wayne Gretzky's agent for many years, but had a huge stable of hockey players at IMG. Mike Barnett was leaving the agency business to go to the Arizona Coyotes and was essentially leaving you, the file, right, JP? And because you were already working there. And I remember writing about this. And I think, people have to be in your shoes in that moment to be a young agent. And let's just call it for what it is. There are other agents in the industry thinking, Mike Barnett is out. Let's go after this young JP Barry guy and see if we can steal clients. I mean, what could you say about
this?
That?
This might actually be your got your back story, I would think.
It
sounds like a heck of a good got your back story.
He did. You know what? He jumped the gun on me there because I was gonna say Pierre it was helpful that he called and put out a big article about what was going on behind the scenes because there wasn't.
Well, I was just curious. How's this young agent going to deal with this? Yeah.
Well, I was on the road, I think 13 months out of the 15 months after he left, just to make sure that all the clientele was going to be there. I had to do meetings everywhere. So it was extremely difficult behind the scenes. You didn't want to show that at the time, but you had to make sure you got on the road and saw every single client. And when your clients are ranging from northern Sweden to west, to Vancouver Island, then it's a lot of travel. So basically, I think I was on the road 13 months out of the next 16 months, and we did, strengthen our group. I brought in some more people to work with me, and then eventually I partnered up with Pat also, at the end of that time frame. So we brought our two groups together right around that same time frame. So it was a long process of trying to make ourselves like I think we like to think we were that next generation of agents that was coming in because we were both pretty young at the time, and it worked. Our partnership has worked also, and we've worked hard together to put a team. But yeah, Pierre, you're got my back. I guess at that time it was a very nice article and introduced.
Who knew?
Introduced what was going on, and it got picked up, and so Pierre gets the nod today for having my back.
Well, and honestly, I as a young journalist, I was so intrigued by that part of the business, right? Who's representing who and what's going on. He
wasn't trying to get your back, JP. He was trying to see if there was some gritty little detail that he could grind out of you, and he inadvertently helped you.
Well,
he went all the way back to New Brunswick and was asking people about my background in New Brunswick.
Oh, goodness.
Like he was.
I wouldn't want to have Pierre LeBrun digging into me. That's all I can say. No, thank you.
You had big shoes to fill with Mike Barnett gone. Yeah, it's a fascinating world, boy. And
that's awesome.
Maybe he was actually working for another agent who told him to write that article.
Yeah, exactly.
Thought it would go a different direction, maybe.
Sewer this guy.
Yeah, that's funny.
Well, JP, listen, man, thank you so much for doing this. I know it'll be a busy few months before you actually get a chance to put your feet up, so we appreciate it. And free agency coming, the draft coming. Make sure you're picking up our calls, man.
Okay, we will.
Please.
Thank you very much,
all right, take care, JP.
Thanks. Appreciate it, JP. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And that'll wrap the podcast, folks. Thanks again to JP Barry for joining us, LeBrun and Johnny. Much appreciated, guys. And of course, big thanks as always to our sponsors. Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals, Kuma Outdoor Gear, and Liberty Smart Security. Johnny and Pierre are on their way to the Stanley Cup Finals. So it'll be an on-location edition of Got Your Back NHL next week. Until then, enjoy the games. We'll see you soon. Cheers.